Welcome, everyone, and thank you for joining us on your lunch hour today. I'm Paula Monopoly, and I'm the Saul and Carlin Hubert Professor of Law and the founding director of our Women Leadership and Equality program. Welcome to the first in a series of panels that the WLE program at the law school is sponsoring. And for those of you who don't know about the WLE program, it's a one of a kind at an American law school curricular program that focuses students on the rich research on the advancement of women in our profession and helps them develop professional skills so they can navigate the legal workplace. Our agenda in the program is twofold. We give our students the ability to advance as individuals in the professions so that they can get into positions of power to make changes to the systemic barriers that hold women back in our profession. And our goal for this panel and for future panels this coming year is to connect our students with our alums, connect our alums with each other, and to provide a vehicle for our seasoned alums to pass down hard-fought knowledge to the next generation. And finally, we want to raise the profile of our terrific students and our talented alums among lawyers and judges and legal academics. And I want to thank Shara Boonshaft for helping to organize this panel, which we're really looking forward to. Just a little bit about the format today. First, I'm going to give you some statistics and then turn it over to our moderator today, who is Sharon Krever-Weisbaum, the managing partner at Brown, Goldstein, and Levy. And Sharon's going to introduce our other terrific panelists who are all leaders in their firms, and all of them are our alums from Maryland Law. So they'll then have a conversation about what skills are essential to advance in the profession, to advance in law firms, and to lead those organizations. And they'll talk until 1 o'clock, and then we'll open it up for Q&A. So please put your questions in the Q&A box at the bottom of the screen, and we'll take as many questions as we can before wrapping up at 1:15. So just a little bit about parity in law firm leadership. We don't have it yet, is basically the bottom line message here. And we're going to talk about that today. And according to the latest National Association of Women Lawyers survey, 28% of governing committees at firms were women, and only 29% of compensation committees were female lawyers, and only 19% of firm-wide managing partners were women. And for people and women of color in particular, the numbers were even lower. So our 5 alums today are unique in the field, and we're very proud of them, and really looking forward to hearing more about their paths and their lessons on leadership. So with that, I'll turn it over to Sharon.
Hello, everyone. Thank you, Professor. Hope everyone is doing well. I wanted to start today first to tell you who's with us. It's exciting for me to be here with my fellow alum leaders, and we're going to tell you a little bit about ourselves and our journey, and we're going to pose some questions to each other, and then we'll take questions from you, if I understand it from the professor. So I'm Sharon Krever-Weisbaum, managing partner at Brown, Goldstein, and Levy in Baltimore. We also have Nancy Green, and she is the chairman or chairperson, president, and chief executive officer of Miles and Stockbridge. So hello, Nancy. We have Diane Diatolo, and she's the managing partner at Tidings. She's probably the newest of the managing partners in our group, so we're excited to hear how that is going. We have Lynn S.B. Williams, Chief Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Officer and a partner at her firm, Cozen O'Connor. We're excited to hear her perspectives. And we have Nikki Nesbitt, and she is the co-managing partner at Goodell DeFries in Baltimore. She'll tell you about the transition that I think their firm is going from one managing partner to another. So I think that's why she is called co-managing partner this year. Did I hit everybody? I think, yes. So we're going to start asking Nancy Green from Miles to introduce herself and to tell us a little bit about herself and her journey.
Good morning, everybody, or good afternoon, I should say. So Nancy Green, and yes, I'm chairman, CEO, president of Miles and Stockbridge. So my journey a little bit, so I'll start with law school. So I'm a graduate of the University of Maryland Law School, obviously. And, I think it's important to know that while in law school, I didn't really know what I wanted to do when I got out of law school. I didn't know if I wanted to litigate. I'm a transactional lawyer by trade, but I wouldn't have guessed it at the time. And I would say definitely, if you would ask me then if I was going to be in a powerful position or a leadership position, it was never even on the radar, not something I thought about. I developed an interest in environmental law while in law school. Came out of law school, worked for the Chesapeake Bay Foundation, clerked for a judge, found my way to Miles and Stockbridge just as a staff lawyer, thinking I'd spend a little bit of time there for a few years, working in the real estate department. And then fast forward, now I've been at Miles for 23 years. After getting to Miles and deciding I really liked it, I switched over to associate, eventually became a partner. I became the assistant practice group leader for the real estate practice group. Eventually the practice group leader, joined our board. Very importantly, got onto our compensation committee, which I think that we can all speak to as a very important committee to get into at a firm. If you're going to be at a law firm, that's where a lot of power does sit because it's setting people's salaries. Eventually became a board member. And then 4 years ago was asked to take on the role of chairman, which I did. And then this past year also took on the roles of CEO and president. So that's a little bit about my story. But I would say that if you had asked me all those years ago, if I envisioned myself in this role, I would say no. But it's been a great journey and I really enjoy it.
Great, thanks, Nancy. How about Lynn? Want to share a bit?
Sure. Hello, everyone. My story is pretty simple and very similar to Nancy's. I grew up on the east side of Columbus, Ohio, and at a very early age, I knew that I wanted to be a lawyer. But more specifically, I wanted to be like my father. He was a practicing lawyer for over 40 years at that time and had a pretty robust civil rights practice. So after attending Spelman College, a historically Black college in the South, and obviously the University of Maryland Law School, I had the privilege of clerking for the Georgia Supreme Court under the incredible tutelage of Justice Leah Ward Sears, who just at the age of 36 years old became the first woman and African American and the youngest person to ever be appointed to the Georgia Supreme Court. So after my clerkship ended, I was looking really just for a short-term position. Like Nancy, I wasn't quite sure what I wanted to do. And I met the managing partner at Cozen O'Connor's Atlanta office, who hired me as a contract lawyer making $25 an hour. This was 15 years ago. And so as you can imagine, $25 an hour at that time was great if you ask me coming out of law school. So 3 months after being a contract lawyer, I was promoted to associate, where I served as chair of the associate committee. 6 years later, I was promoted to partner. 2 years later, I became the vice chair office managing partner in Atlanta. 4 years after that, I was promoted and appointed as the chief diversity officer. In August of 2019, I became an equity partner and a member of our firm's board of directors. Now, I know that was quick and probably extremely hard to follow, but it's important that I say all of this, not to toot my own horn, but it's actually for the opposite reason. And I'm sharing my accomplishments, in which some say is in a relatively short period of time, to make the important point that there's no way that I would be where I am today without several people that have helped me along the way. I did not experience my success at Cozen alone, and I had help, and sometimes significant help, whether it be from a managing partner that ensured that I was involved in significant litigation matters and had meaningful client contact, or by my sponsor who indulged me as a very young lawyer who literally barged into his office 15 years ago and humbly requested his mentorship. And I just would not be here without hard work or perseverance, the support of my Maryland classmates and the professors, and of course, without the support of other women. So the reason that my story is relevant to our discussion today is because my career trajectory and the success that I've experienced at my tenure at Cozen is really a clear reflection of the education and the relationships that I forged during my 3 years at Maryland Carey Law. So in closing, never in 1,000 years did I imagine, did I envision, or consider that I would become an equity partner at an international law firm before the age of 40. I was so limited in my thinking when I entered law school, but when I finished, I truly believed that I could do anything. So thank you for having me.
Great. Wow. That's exciting. So thanks for sharing. How about Diane, my friend? How about your journey?
Well, unlike Lynn, I had no idea I was going to end up a lawyer at all. Law school was sort of a detour on my way to becoming an actress. Started, and University of Maryland was the only law school I applied to, and it was sort of a hand of God kind of a concept. Is this really what I should be doing? So I ended up at University of Maryland, and still hesitant in the beginning as to whether I belonged or whether I should be there, or, you know, what was I doing, until I discovered trial advocacy and moot court. And then it was as if a light bulb went off, and I knew what I was supposed to do with the rest of my life. I knew that being a trial lawyer was what I would be and needed to be. I attended a panel at the University of Maryland Law School of judicial law clerks telling about their experiences. I very quickly assessed, because I think I was all of 21 at the time, that appellate law sounded incredibly boring. And none of those appellate clerkships sounded like a good idea to me at all. So I quickly fixated on the circuit court for Baltimore City and a trial court clerkship, because all I wanted to do was be in a courtroom. And I was lucky to get one. And if anybody's listening who's debating it and wants to be a litigator or a trial lawyer of any sort, I can't speak more highly of the fact that a clerkship is a great idea if you can get one. I then was fortunate to get a job at my first choice law firm. Tidings and Rosenberg was and still is medium size for the market. There were enough people so that I felt that I was part of a team. The people there were great. It was and still is a general practice law firm, so there was lots of different kinds of things to do. And I quickly, and I didn't want to be, personally did not want to be one small cog in this big giant wheel. I really wanted to be on that stage of some sort. And so I quickly adjusted and loved the firm. And in the first 10 years of my practice, managed to volunteer for every single case going to trial. And of course, I got assigned to them by partners, but I also, if I heard one was going to trial, I would, you know, kind of weasel my way in and see, does anybody need any more help? Does anybody need any help? And managed to try everything from real estate disputes to a bankruptcy case to tortious interference, products liability, you name it. After about 10 years, I realized that the thing that was fascinating me was the medicine that I was seeing in some of the cases, and decided I really wanted to represent healthcare providers. And that sort of leads me to the why did I stay at Tidings for all this time, which has been decades now. And part of the reason was that the firm gave me an opportunity to follow my passion, figure out what I wanted to do, and then support me when I chose to do it. So we had no healthcare clients at the time. I had no one at the firm to learn from as to how to defend a healthcare provider or an institution. We did not particularly have a lot of insurance defense kind of work. So it was up to me to, one, learn how to do it, and two, go figure out somebody who would give me their business so I could do it. I worked hard. I worked a lot of weekends, a lot of nights, because I started teaching myself how to do what I wanted to do sort of on the side. And by volunteering every chance I could get, going down to the circuit court and watching people try cases, defending healthcare providers, and slowly but surely grew my practice. I spent a lot of time doing things outside of the firm so that I wouldn't, so to the extent I know there are people that can't sit still, I'm probably one of those people, but I knew the grass wasn't any greener than where I was. And so my not sitting still led me to become a leader in a lot of bar associations, nonprofits, different organizations where I learned a lot of skills. And then as Sharon says, I come latest. I'm the earliest grad at, from this group, though I will have to say I was 23 when I graduated law school. But I'm the latest to be in the top spot at Tidings. I can't explain that really. But I will say to everyone that I do think that a certain amount of financial clout and a certain amount of just time being out there and working really, really hard is probably really needed as you progress along.
Okay, thank you, Diane. Nikki, where are you? There you are.
Right here.
Great.
Thank you so much. And thank you to all of you who are joining us this afternoon. It is so great to be here because like Diane, I'm actually new to the leadership role as well in some ways. I have so much in common with all of these panelists. I think there are themes that run through all of our stories. We don't have everything the same, but we do have some commonalities, and it's really interesting to hear each of them speak. I too landed in a law firm situation without ever thinking that that's where I was going to end up. I started college as a criminology major. I was interested, really, I wasn't interested in criminology when I chose it, but I became interested in criminology after I took some classes. And so what I decided to do was go into the FBI, just like Clarice Starling, because that's what you did in the 90s. You watched that movie and decided you were going to go into the FBI. And one path for going into the FBI and getting into forensics, which was my new passion as a 19-year-old or something, was to go to law school, because it's actually, there are only so many ways you can get in. So I went to law school with every intention of going to the FBI. So I applied for an internship my first year. I didn't even really come close to getting it. I think I was like 3 cuts from the last cut, from, get like the last round of cuts, not like the last person, I think I told some guy, I asked him if his granddaughter went to my school or something, and he was like, my daughter's 5 or something. It was bad. Anyway, didn't get that job. But what I did find out was through this group that I was, this community group that I was involved in law school of students, there was summer associate jobs still available in a few firms, one of which was Miles and Stockbridge, which I applied for and got, and civil litigation was suddenly a thing that I had to learn about, and really enjoyed that. So after my second year of law school, because of the theme of medicine that I was still interested in by that time, I applied to the firm I'm with now, which is Goodell DeVries. We have a very large medical malpractice contingent here. And I loved everybody that I met here. And there was every opportunity to get involved in medical malpractice from the start, versus Miles, which had everything under the sun, and not everything was available to a really young lawyer. At Goodell, we had a very specific focus on medical malpractice and being able to get into it at a very young age. So I did 2 summer associate jobs here, once after my second year, once after my third year while I was studying for the bar. And I clerked 2 for a judge. And just sitting here talking about this made me realize, when I was working at Goodell as a summer associate, I was working mostly for women partners. And then I went on to clerk for a judge in federal court. And that was a woman judge who was the chief magistrate judge in Maryland at the time. And she was a firecracker too. And my mentor when I came back to Goodell DeVries was Linda Wolf, who is my co-managing partner now, but at the time was not in leadership. She was just an awesome, badass attorney. And she did not do med mal, but she was my mentor we don't pair people you work with as mentors and mentees. So the idea is to have somebody you don't work with be your mentor. And so I met her, and she just absolutely shepherded me through the process of being a great litigator. To some degree, it had to do with being a great female litigator, but to some degree, it had nothing to do with that. I was just happy to have the support of somebody who would show me the way. So, you know, I took some leadership positions like some of my co-panelists in other organizations. I became the treasurer and then secretary and then whatever else of Maryland Defense Council before I became president of that organization a few years ago. We also belong to this other national group. It's called the Trial Network. I'm happy to tell anybody about it who's interested, but I became chair of that last year, right during the pandemic. It was great. But the whole point of that was to put on presentations, like in-person presentations. And I had a whole year of not doing anything, but I can still call myself chair or whatever. Anyway, I had these leadership positions before I joined our firm's executive committee of 3 people, and had that job for a little while. And now as Linda starts to step into retirement and has groomed me all these years, I'm taking her position as managing partner, and I could not be prouder or more prepared for this position because of her leadership in my career. So I am super excited to be taking on this work. I'm very pleased to see how many successful women from our law school are here doing the same thing. And I just think it's an amazing experience. And I hope the same for all of you who are participating in this webinar.
Great, thanks. Very just awesome. Fun. So I'll tell you a little bit about myself. So I was supposed to be a social worker or a teacher. And even now, I kind of am a little bit. But my father was a lawyer and a housing rights advocate. Every time I called him from college and told him I was going to go the social work path or the teaching path, he said, no, you can't do that. You gotta do something else. So, and that was a long time ago. So I had this dad who pushed and pushed and pushed for me to be a lawyer. I waited 5 years after college. I kept deferring admission literally 5 times because I really was going to be a social worker. But here I was. I went to Maryland and I spent almost my entire time doing clinic work. It was the best thing I could have ever done. I loved every moment of my clinical experience, and that has really served me well. Maryland, back, I've been practicing for 35 years, whatever, but Maryland had this incredible clinic program then, and I know it's just skyrocketed now. My mentors were both men and women at Maryland. I mean, I was thinking of it, I had at least 3 powerfully wonderful women mentors at University of Maryland Law, as well as 3 men. From there, my second year of law school, I worked at the law firm of Brown Goldstein, now Brown Goldstein Levy, but I was a 2L there and sat at a little desk at the partner in his office. Can you imagine how, like, a little desk in Chris Brown's office, and spent my summer there and then continued on during the school year. However, when I graduated, I went to the Office of the Attorney General. Loved it. Spent 11 years there at Maryland AG's office and did mainly healthcare regulatory work. After 11 years, it was like, okay, I'm going to either spend my whole career at the AG's office, which could have been fabulous, but if I was going to make a jump, it was that time. I went into private practice. And within 2 years, I found myself back at Brown Goldstein and Levy, where I am now the managing partner. So I've been there since, 20 plus years. And when I say I'm a social worker and a teacher and a lawyer, I do think that's true, because I have a lot of my practice kind of combines those skills. Although I never got a degree in social work, I think it's the people part of my practice of law that I have loved the most, and that I've then been able to pivot into managing. because I think being a leader and managing is a huge part, is about understanding people, relationships, building teams, being able to kind of balance the business needs and the people needs and all of that. So that's my journey. I still love it. And I do about half and half management and half lawyering. So that's kind of where I am. So I wanted, has everyone, so that's our journey. I mean, I think there's some themes here that we can revisit. I don't think any of us knew we were going to be sitting in a management role, that's for sure. And so you don't have to have that as your goal, but I do think, and we're going to throw some questions around, but I think the first thing you all, people who are younger lawyers or law students, you want to become great lawyers first. I mean, to me, that's what I tell young lawyers. Get your skills as a lawyer first. So let me ask my colleagues here, what about your experience at the law school, University of Maryland Law, Cary Law, prepared you either to be an effective lawyer or an effective leader? Take your pick. But Nikki, can you think of something at the University of Maryland that kind of, you use today?
Absolutely, a bunch of things. But so I'm with you, Sharon, on the clinic. I wish I had said something about that as part of my journey, because it's absolutely critical in what I did. I took a criminal defense clinic with Professor Jerry Deese. I kept up with him for a long time, but he was just phenomenal in terms of advocacy. I also took, he started a new class called evidence and trial advocacy, where they combined evidence and trial advocacy. It was new that year that I took it. And it was a 6-credit class. Like, you better do well in this class or you're screwed. And it was a tremendous, I had that along with the clinic. So it was the greatest. I was learning all of these skills and everything. And then I was using them in the clinic, where we paired with the Federal Public Defender's Office. And this was before I got a clerkship. I think it was before that. But it was great to have that experience. And it taught me, just as Sharon was saying, kind of start honing those skills when you can, because when you go into a summer associate position or an associate position, and you've already kind of started to master being on your feet, if litigation is where you want to go, and not everybody on this panel is in that, but finding those skills and trying to use them in real life before you're actually in real life, that was a great opportunity. And then the other thing that I did at Maryland that really shaped where I went was, I had civil procedure 2, the more advanced civil procedure with Sherilyn Eiffel, like a freaking legend, which like I didn't know at the time how legendary she was, but every time I see her, I'm like, I had her. She was my we were close. We weren't that close. And she had this thing going on the Eastern Shore, where we went down there and we were helping with this Eastern Shore project as they were, the government was trying to run Route 13 right through this neighborhood. And I had the opportunity with that project to learn how to speak to witnesses and people and understand their story and start having that compassion and that empathy that becomes so important with lawyering, in real life later. So I had the skill side, the kind of academic side put to use, and then I had the empathic side put to use, all in like the second and third year of law school, which help shape those skills, which help make me a little bit more confident. And I think ultimately that is what leads to leadership, when you feel like you have a little bit of control over how you're supposed to be doing this job, then relating to other people on the level of trying to teach them and help work them through the system and learning things becomes more natural. And I just had such great teachers there. And I could say a million other things, but I want to have everybody else talk about their experiences. But don't take for granted who's teaching you, because those people they have the life experience that you can't have at this level but you can absorb from them. And it's just so critically important for the future.
Okay, thanks. Nancy, do you have a thought from your Maryland years?
You know, it's funny, Nikki just shared one. So I also had Sherilyn for civil procedure and worked on the same, highway cases down in Salisbury. I will say the one thing that I learned about that, in addition to what Nikki shared, which she's spot on, was kind of this notion of patience, or maybe I honed a little bit of maturity during those experiences, because as a young person, I wanted change to happen very quickly. And you'd work on projects like this that obviously I'm a couple years older than Nikki, and you realize that actually change takes time, and it takes a lot of just hard work and dedication, and you can't go in and change something very quickly, but you have to keep at it. And so that experience of just kind of feeling like a little bit of it was a growth moment for me in law school of, the work that I was working on existed before I got to law school, and it was going to continue to be there after I was finished law school. And positive change takes a lot of work.
Great, thanks. How about anyone else, Lynn? A law school?
So I think Nancy and Nikki both stole the show with their clinic, because I would say that as well. When I was in law school, I did the Access to Justice clinic with Professor Douglas Colbert, who was life-changing for me. And anyone who knows Professor Colbert knows how passionate he is about providing access to justice to all of those involved, specifically in the criminal justice system. It was there that I, number one, realized that I was not going to ever be able to do criminal law. So I was grateful for that experience, because I also think great experiences that you have in law school or beyond, if you can check the box of what you don't want to do, then it's an experience worth going through. But also, while I was a law student at Maryland, I interned at the Public Defender Service for DC. And that was a pivotal moment for me. Not only did I realize it was probably not going to be the area of law in which I thrived, but it taught me about compassion. It taught me about the importance of pro bono service. It taught me so many things that at just the ripe age of 23 years old, I was getting these incredible experiences and experiences with people that I didn't have prior to being in law school. And so I think that has really shaped a lot of the leader that I am today. I'm able to see past the trees when people or when individuals have certain issues that hopefully that I can assist with. I'm able to really connect with people on a level that, this experience has really lended me those skills. And so I'm grateful for that from my law school career and for the relationships that I made, which you'll hear me say a lot today about the importance of that. So when I think about my Maryland experience and how I've been shaped as a leader, I think about that clinic, but also the internships that I've had while I was in law school.
Great, thanks. So Diane, I'm going to pose a question to you. You mentioned when you were talking about being a leader now, that a lot of experiences you had even outside your firm led to the skills you have as a leader. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, they really did. And I certainly would encourage anybody who ends up being in a firm that is not as large as a Miles, for example, that you're going to learn a lot from being involved outside of the firm. And I sort of feel like I started, my heart was at Tidings when I started, and I feel that I have spent, years and years and years doing all different sorts of leadership positions, and now have brought it all back home. What I would say about outside organizations, and like Nikki, I did the Maryland Defense Council leadership, and then did some DRI, and I was involved in an international, I was on the board of directors of an international legal association, and also recently, president of Executive Alliance, which used to be Network 2000, which is a completely different sort of a thing entirely. And what I would say about all of that is I am I never advocate that somebody get themselves involved in 10 different things at a time, just so you can put it on your resume. It gets you nowhere. You don't make an impression on folks that way. And you don't actually get out of an organization everything you can get out of it. So I found very early on that by taking sort of the least desirable job in an organization, and that typically, in my view, is the newsletter, and doing it better than anybody did it before, gets you noticed in an organization. Even in Executive Alliance, I started as the secretary, which was not, I wrote the minutes, and I went to every meeting and wrote the minutes for 3 years. If you take on just one or two of these kinds of organizations and pick a job, do it really well, work your way up, you learn amazing things about team building, about building consensus, which are two really critical things to know how to do, I think, to be a leader anywhere. You'll learn, you already know about hard work, but knowing about hard work in different settings is a really good idea. And you meet lots of people in other settings that teach you things that you can bring back home to your practice or to being a manager of any sort, I think.
Thanks. So Nancy, I'm sure you've been involved outside of your firm in lots of things as well, but you have also, it sounds like, been on every committee that Miles has, and you've just been all over. Can you want to talk a little bit about your role and how it transformed from your associate days to being on compensation committees to being on other things and where you've landed? Because you are managing a huge place.
Yeah, so I will say, and I saw something in the Q&A a little bit, and it kind of touches on that exactly, which was, there was a question there about, it sounds like you've been focusing a bit on your career and how did you do your day-to-day job? I would say that I actually spent my years just doing my job well. I'm a real estate finance lawyer, real estate development lawyer, and I worked for amazing partners at my firm, and I always worked really, really hard, which I can tell from all of these other women. That's what we do. We work really hard and try to get involved in as many, for me, it was not cases, it's transactions as possible to get as much experience, just kind of honing the craft of being a lawyer. But I think when you are constantly working really hard and you get noticed for working hard, you start getting opportunities to, hey, can you sit on this committee? So it started for me at Miles with the practice group leaders said, hey, can you help? The practice group is getting kind of big. Can you help me with it? And it was a little bit like Diane said, I spent a lot of my time taking minutes from the meetings and doing the agenda, making sure there was coffee, which all sounds almost demeaning female roles that you would take on. And I didn't see it that way. I encourage men and women to both take on those roles because you get noticed. And so after a while, I was doing so much of that for the practice group that others in the firm said, well, why don't you just be the practice group leader? You're kind of doing the job. And so I moved into that role. And then it was later in my career that I started wanting to have what I would say is my voice. Like I had ideas of how I thought the firm could be better. Not that it's not a great firm. I've been there my entire career, so I love the firm. And I would also say that firm leadership always really supported women at our firm. I mean, the prior chairman, John Frisch, exceptionally supported diversity and women in particular, and was reaching out and asking my opinion at times. And so when I would have conversations with him, then he would suggest, hey, maybe you should think about sitting on such and such a committee. And I would say yes, every time. Because it is a way to get your voice heard. But I will share that I think one of the things that's interesting for women, and this is one little bit of nugget that I would leave women with, is I see a lot of strength in women, and a lot of women, even in my firm now, or I see outside my firm, have their voice and they have confidence. Except sometimes when you say, take on this leadership role, that's when maybe they step back a little bit. Sometimes I'll see women say, well, how about I'll be the number 2, but I don't want to be the number 1 in whatever it is. You know, the confidence is there, but there's a hesitation in that confidence. And I would say that I don't sometimes see that hesitation in young men. So my advice is don't stifle your confidence. You know, all of us, myself included, suffer from things like imposter syndrome, which is like, when are they all going to figure out that I'm really not as good as they all think I am? But I've come to realize that a lot of people feel that, and a lot of men feel that. And so sometimes the most confident men really aren't the most confident men when you get to know them. It's just how they express it. And I've come to realize that both men and women have insecurities, but sometimes women let their insecurities hold them back a little bit, whereas men actually sometimes respond with overconfidence. But they're, you know, we're all kind of the same in our own insecurities. So I would say, to, you know, similar to Diane's point, when you're given opportunities, if you don't think you're going to do a good job because you don't have the time, then don't do it, because you don't want to make a bad impression. But if you have the time and you want to do it, but you're just a little uncertain, know that that's how most of us have felt it along the way. And just trust yourself. And if you have the time to do it, you'll find a way to be successful. If you've made it through law school, you've made it into a career, there's a track record there for your success, and that you just need to trust your own confidence and kind of take that step forward.
Great. So I'm going to throw this next question to Lynn and Nikki. And also to the audience, just to say, you know, we have probably all balanced children and running to the sports field and all of that with everything else we're talking about. So rest assured that we've all done that balance and done it probably in different ways, but you can do this balance. That is really, you know, from me to you, you can do this balance. But here's the question. So the data out there nationally isn't very good in terms of the numbers of women in the highest positions in firms. So how has your firm or whatever else has influenced this? What have they done to allow you, let's say Lynn or Nikki, to get where you are? Like, why are we there, but the data is not looking that great still?
No, I agree, Sharon. And if you think about just women in general, the numbers are not where they should be. But when you think about women of color, we are even more unicorns when you think about big law. I'll say there are many things about Cozen O'Connor and our firm management that has made it possible for me to lead and emerge as a leader at our firm, whether it's the firm's true commitment to the professional development of its lawyers, or its commitment to providing diverse attorneys like me opportunities to assume to management positions, or its unwavering support of women, similar to what Nancy said about her firm. But given all of that, I am still keenly aware and understand that my experience is the exception in big law and is necessarily not the rule. And so I view my role as the Chief Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Officer, and also just as a female partner at our law firm, and as a member of the Women's Initiative Committee, to make sure that this becomes the rule for women and diverse attorneys in our firm. To make sure that it's a rule, if you will, that we all receive opportunities for professional development, that we all feel a part of an inclusive work environment, that we're all working together to recruit, support, and promote women within our law firm. One way we've done that is Cozen O'Connor is Mansfield certified, which is a part of the Mansfield rule, where we have pledged to consider 30% women, lawyers of color, lawyers that identify as LGBTQ+, as well as lawyers with disabilities for all of our leadership and governance roles. Not only is it the right thing to do, it has shifted the culture of our law firm to ensure that women, particularly, and people of color, and people that identify as LGBTQ+, have an opportunity or the same opportunities as everyone else. And so we get a lot of things. We have a lot of things on our plate at Cozen. We pride ourselves on embracing women in our leadership ranks. Our diversity committee is focused on that for the year, but also we have a very large representation of women on our board of directors, on our management committee. And so we also not just talk the talk, we walk the walk. And that is the reason, to your point, I think, Diane, about the reason you've stayed so long at your firm. That's the reason I stayed so long at Cozen, is because I've been given these opportunities and the support to be entrepreneurial all at the same time.
Great.
That's
Impressive firm. Nikki.
great to hear, Lynn, because different firms do it in different ways and might have to change with the times a little bit. So at my firm, in terms of women leadership and support, it has been less intentional and much more organic, with the reason being that we have a focus on autonomy and flexibility here. We're a smaller firm, so there's much less formality for our associates going into partnership in terms of how much you have to be here, where you can do your work. So even well before COVID, there was a lot more get your work done from wherever, at whatever time it works for you. They care about hours, of course, that's our means of earning, but they don't care about how you perform your work or where you perform your work from here. And so when I was doing a lot of recruiting for our firm, I would tell these young associates, based on my own experience, because I started here as a summer associate and went from there, that what has allowed me to thrive is the ability to do my work at my pace. Making sure that the work gets done for the cases, but if that means doing it, leaving at 3 o'clock to go to my son's game or a recital or something like that, I do that. And then I might have to go back to work later, but nobody's saying, why did you leave at 2:30? That part of our firm's culture, that flexibility, that autonomy, that trust that you're going to get your work done, even if it means that you're not here during a peak business time, that was what allowed me to thrive. And I think a lot of women who are balancing the life experience of, whatever it is you have to do in your personal life, whether it's parenthood or something different. So that was sort of an organic thing. But in terms of diversity in other ways, we have had to be much more intentional. That same level of flexibility is not, it does not attract all of the kinds of diversity that we want. It is very good from the side of being female friendly. It's not as important in other ways, because we're a smaller firm. We don't have ridiculous, starting salaries and that kinds of thing. So we try to compensate that for that by having this flexibility, but that doesn't appeal to every single type of lawyer we want to have here. And so you do have to become more intentional about your draw in some other ways. But fortunately for us, in terms of fostering success among women of my generation, it was all about the flexibility. That was what made the difference for me. And with generations below us, it may not be the same.
Great. So Nancy, in a big firm, and I know you said your firm has been great supporting women, but where do you think, at least if we look nationally at big law, because the data shows a lot of women start there and then leave. So, and I don't know exactly why, but what do you think the factors are that prevent women from going the equity partner management track or get there?
Yeah, it's hard. That's a hard one, because similar to Nikki's experience, my firm has always been really flexible with the schedules. And I think flexible schedules are important to women. I think it's also important to young men having children now too. So before, the traditional path was the men didn't really care about the flexible schedules because they didn't really have many family obligations. But now younger generations, I think, are much better with splitting the family obligations. And so you see both young men and young women trying to balance it. When I've talked to friends at other firms, they sometimes discuss the flexibility, but I think also it can become a mindset that we just need to overcome by conversation. So by that, I mean, so for instance, today I'm working at home. I do go into the office a couple days a week, and usually my day to go to the office is Tuesday. Because I have a lot of meetings with a variety of people on Tuesday. But I'm here today because today is one of my sons, my youngest is turning 11. And I wanted to be home today because I wanted to not be rushing home late and have him think, oh, when is dinner going to be ready? And how are we going to do his birthday celebration? And so not only am I home today because it's his birthday and I'm able to work remotely, but I tell everybody at the office. Every single person at my office knew that I was not at a meeting today because I wanted to be at home because it was my 11-year-old's birthday. I think you need to say that because sometimes women in particular will be afraid that if they say that, they think that it will be held against them. I also think in talking to other women that sometimes they think, well, I just can't do it all. People often will ask me, how do you do it all? So I have 5 children and they're like, how do you manage all of that? And I still practice and run the firm. How do you do it? And that's just amazing. And I say it's actually not that amazing because one, I have tremendous amounts of help. So I will say that I have a great general counsel. I have a great board of directors. I have great staff. I have all these wonderful things at my firm that are very helpful. So I'm not doing it all on my own at Miles. And similarly, I have a very great and strong family. So my husband helps me a lot. I will tell young people, if you're not married yet or you haven't found your life partner, look for a life partner that will support you and your career. That's tremendously important. If your role in your relationship is to support that other person's career solely, that's probably going to lead to some trouble for your career later because you really do need support at home. And then finally, I think that women sometimes feel the burden of they must be perfect at all of it. You must be a great lawyer. You must be a great leader, and you must be a great mother. And somehow, if you're not, then you have failed. And I will tell you, I try to tell people that I'm a good mother some days, I'm a good lawyer some days, and I'm a good leader some days. And I know how to prioritize. That's the one thing that I have learned. And there are times when I need to focus on my family. And the work is there. And I balance my schedule for that week or the calendar to get it done. And I don't drop the ball, but it doesn't outweigh what might be the family responsibility, the soccer game, the birthday party, whatever it is. Similarly, there are other times when there's an important matter going on for a client. So I may have to get home later that night. And that's just got to be okay with my family because there are some nights you're just going to be later. I think women need to let themselves off the hook a little bit and just know that we're not expecting perfection. I don't expect perfection from my lawyer. I expect them to work hard, try their best, be available, but no one's perfect. I'm not perfect. Same in other leadership roles. So I think that my hope is that COVID will help women in firms. Now, the data right now is showing that it's having the exact opposite effect. And the data is showing that more and more women are pulling back because they're not feeling the flexibility they need. They're fearful about returning to work and things like that. So my hope is that that isn't and doesn't end up being the long-term effect on women in the profession, and that big firms find that balance. When I talk to managing partners of other firms across the country, I know that managing partners are committed to help their lawyers find that balance because there's a lot of money and time that's invested in developing a young lawyer. And I don't think that, women or even men realize that, like, if you've made it 5 or 6 years in a firm, there's a lot of investment in time, money, people, all of that in your career. And so we really don't want to see you leave the profession. We really want to keep you. And that's where I think maybe firms just need to be better at having the conversation about, is this working for you, and kind of meeting people where they are in that stage of their life. So, I don't know. I was just, as I mentioned, extremely fortunate because my firm, we have, I think we're 50% of our leadership is women. Our practice group leaders are women. Our board is women, has 50% women. I mean, we're very focused on on that, and it has taken time, but I think that that's when other women see women leaders within their organization who are able to juggle it and balance it, it gives them the confidence that they can do it too.
Great. I could come work for you, Nancy.
You
So,
could.
Diane, you
That
seem
might be
to.
upsetting to Brown Goldstein.
Oh, no, don't tell him. Don't tell him. Diane was smiling and nodding as I was when Nancy was saying a lot of what she was saying. So Diane, why don't you, we're just at the close of our our discussion here before we turn to the audience questions. So Diane, what was in your head a few times there? Or something that you wanted to say?
Nancy's right that it sort of takes a village on every level of your world to make all of this happen. And the flexibility concept is brand new, really. It's brand new in terms of how long I've been practicing law. And of course, being flexible also requires that at 9 o'clock at night, you might be working. And because you weren't working at 2 in the afternoon. And what I was thinking about during all of this is that at some point when my practice was incredibly busy about 10 years ago, my daughter developed cancer and required me to be at the hospital all the time. And my husband and I alternated nights at the hospital with 2 kids home and 1 in the hospital because we didn't want anybody here at the house to feel, unloved and unneeded. And we didn't want anybody here at the hospital to feel, that she was being ignored. And what happened in that process is that at the time I was working with an incredibly capable associate who became my incredibly capable partner not that long afterwards, who also adjusted as my world sort of adjusted very quickly. He adjusted to, okay, well, at 10 o'clock at night, when the world has settled down for Diane, I know I'm going to be on the phone with her. And she's going to be downloading, okay, do this, do this, do this. And my clients were incredible and understanding, and somehow it all got done. But the underline is nobody does any of this by themselves. I mean, you do all of it as a village or you don't get anywhere. But you have to be flexible too. You can't just expect the firm to be flexible. You too, as a person, have to own it and do your part of it too. It really becomes a partnership all the way around.
Okay, thanks, great. So Professor, I turn this back to you, or is that where we are?
Where is she? Where is she?
Paula, our friend? Or so, yes, she's coming back on.
Here I am. Okay, thank you guys for this really rich and terrific conversation. And our audience has some questions that they'd like you to turn to. So the first one, Nancy, you had taken this one and started to address it in terms of the balance between putting time into your job to make sure you're doing a good job at your lawyering and for your clients, and also still looking forward at the same time to what are the next steps I want to take in my career. And what we see and what we talk to our students about in the WLE program is that women tend to put their head down. They eat at their desk because they have all of these other things going on that you all quite clearly outlined, and that they don't then tend to spend time internally networking in their organization, doing the things that we traditionally think of as necessary to building the relationships to then be sort of endorsed for the leadership position that you all have ascended to. And so the question is then, for any of our other panelists, did you think about that as you were sort of going through the process of becoming partners and dealing with your clients? Did you think both on that individual level, doing great work, but were you thinking prospectively, and did you do internal networking? What other steps did you take to then sort of be the person who was called upon to be the leader in the firm and to fill the leadership roles that you're currently filling? Sharon, why don't you start? 'Cause you've been moderating.
Oh, so I was thinking, I I probably, yes, a little bit without it being that conscious. But I probably, anytime there were committees or opportunities to help a partner or another, another lawyer in the firm on a matter, whether it was a case or a committee, I would say, sure. I don't think I even knew it as consciously, but partners tell me now that that was a big deal. Like they noticed more than I probably planned it that way. But it was a way to also get to know the people, especially if it wasn't, well, whether it was a case or a committee, that was the way you build the relationships with the people in the firm. So as I said, I don't know if I was so intentional about it, but I did it. And so when I look back, and now as a leader, I build a lot of opportunities for people. So I have lots of committees. It's kind of how my management structure is. So a lot of the young associates are on those committees and they volunteer to be on them. And they're doing these incredible, things on these committees. And it's those committees in our firm that bring me recommendations and creative new thinking that then we implement. So I think for a leader now is creating opportunities for people to get involved in your firm.
Diane?
Yeah, I would say this though. I think I must have just been, and probably still am, wildly driven because I just always, if there was something else going on, I wanted to be part of it. And now sitting where I sit and having seen many, many, many young lawyers at this point, there is a standout quality in someone who simply wants to volunteer or sees that something's going on and will go to you and say, look, if you need any help on this. It's amazing how infrequently over the long trajectory, I see what to me just seemed like a natural thing to do. Well, oh gosh, what's going on over there? But that quality, I strongly suggest is, even if you're working on a case and you have an idea and you've been working with this partner for a long time on a case and you have an idea, do not be shy about saying, well, you said to do it this way, but have you thought about doing it that way as well, or different, or have you thought of another angle on this? That kind of initiative, that kind of drive, that kind of thinking and dedication really can get you a long way.
Great. And then I want to pivot. I think the next question in the chat was about retaining women. And you all mentioned a little bit of the data. I think when you were talking, Nancy and Sharon, about women leaving the leaky pipeline, right? And certainly leaving big law. And so the question is, how do firms combat that? How do they retain women? How do they support women? And Lynn, you were mentioning some of the things like the Women's Initiative. And if you could just speak a little bit about that and your firm's efforts in what a Women's Initiative is structured to do.
Sure. So, it's no secret that big law has a difficult time retaining women. I'll just say all law firms have a difficult time retaining women and people of color. And so it's a very tricky thing, because if we all knew the answer to that, we wouldn't be struggling so badly. But when you think about law schools are pretty diverse. They have a good amount of women, people of color, individuals that identify as LGBTQ+, but for whatever reason, that doesn't translate to law firms. And I don't have the answer to it, but what I will say is that, to Nikki's point, providing flexibility, thinking innovatively about how to support women, not assuming that all women coming through the doors of your law firm are interested in your maternity policy. I think that's one way to retain women. It was amazing because my 15 years at Cozen, I've had 3 children. And every time I took an extended maternity leave, one, because of course I wanted to be home with my child, but also because I could. I knew that I could step away. I knew that I had women supporting me that would pick up my cases. And I knew that I could trust them with my client relationships. And to me, that was key in my retention, was having a safe place to be able to grow and thrive and develop and serve, and to have women standing right next to me, rooting for me, pushing me along the way, supporting me was key. So focusing on other than the obvious of, making sure there's equal pay and making sure that you're providing women the same opportunities as men, what's also equally important as giving them the space and opportunity to develop those relationships. One story that I just wanted to mention, and I know we're short on time, was my very first client 10 years ago came from a woman that graduated in my law school class. She introduced me to someone that she knew that was a client that she was conflicted out of taking, and she referred that client to me. And that client turned into a multi-million-dollar client 10 years later. Now, I was not very close with this particular woman in law school, but because of the respect that we have for one another, because we had that Maryland connection, she trusted me with her relationship. And so you have to support other women along the way, whether it's an associate, whether it's a partner, whether it's a shareholder, whether it's your assistant. Everyone gets the same level of respect. And that has really helped my career, is to have women behind me, pushing me along the way, and me also pushing women up the corporate ladder as well.
Great. Anyone else in terms of innovative things that your firms have done that you think have been really instrumental in retention issues here?
Well, Paul, I would add, and it's not really to that point, but I think one thing that we should look at when we look at the data, it's the one thing I look at when we lose women, is where are we losing them to? So if you're losing them to another firm, if you're losing them to maybe they want to get out of the practice of law, then you really have to ask yourself, how did you fail them? But if you're losing them because they have gotten an amazing position in-house I have a couple women in my firm that I know are going to be on the bench soon. I know that at some point in their career, they're going to go to the bench. And I think about it, well, that's a wonderful way to lose a woman, right? And so I think that, having conversations early with all your lawyers, but particularly your women, and I don't have the hesitation to ask a young associate, what do you see your career path? You want to be at a law firm forever? Do you want to go in-house somewhere? Do you want to be a judge? Like, what do you see your career path being? Because sometimes losing someone from a firm really isn't losing them from the network of your firm. And we don't have enough of that. I wish that all of the women that left us left because of those reasons. And so there's still a lot of work to do, but I think that from a retention thing, I sometimes look at it, it's not every lawyer leaves, not every woman lawyer leaves because there's something that they're missing, other than it's a really cool opportunity, and I'm so happy and proud for them. So we should just keep that in mind too.
That's great. The next question is something that we talk about with our students again, and it's how do you balance going the extra mile to volunteer and to do these activities and still set appropriate work boundaries? And we call this the power of no, which as a young lawyer is very hard to develop, right? A good no. I'd love to work with you, but in the next case perhaps. And so if somebody wants to just volunteer to talk about how do you develop that quality as you go from being new associate, right, to partner and beyond, still learning to say no and saying it in a positive way so that you don't set up expectations that you can't meet.
Say, Professor, that I think now more so than anything that younger associates are much better setting boundaries than we were when I was coming up. I never said no, and I think that was a mistake when I think back on it. Of course, we were seen as the go-to lawyer. We were always available. But I just think the newer generation does a better job at setting boundaries. I'll also say when I was younger and I was not married and didn't have children, it was hard to say no because everyone would say, oh, give it to Lynn. She's not married. She doesn't have kids. She can do it. And I don't know that that's fair either, because just because you're a single woman and you don't have children doesn't mean that you also don't have a life and that you don't want me time. So that's a very good question. I would love to hear what my fellow panelists have to say about that. But creating professional boundaries is a skill that we as women must master in order to be able to take care of ourselves.
I think we have time for one more, Nikki.
Yeah, I think one thing that has been helpful to me and that I mentor other people to do is that when you decide you have to put that boundary in place, have a contingency for the person you're saying no to. It's the best way to get rid of the guilt of saying no. So if somebody were to ask me, Nikki, can you take these 5 depositions because I'm not, I'm underwater and I'm not able to take them, and I feel like I'm also underwater. Before I say no, I'm going to reach out to a couple of other people and see if they can do it. So that when I go back to the partner who asked me, I can say, I'm also underwater, but I asked around and it sounds like these 3 people have some capacity for you. And if you'd like, I can explain the case to them or something. You're giving an option back to the person you're saying no to that says, I can go this far and I will, but somebody's going to have to take it from that point forward. And I have an idea for you. And if you're able to do that, you haven't said no. You've said, here's another alternative. And that way you have actually been the helpful person that they came to you for, but provided a slightly different answer than just, yes, I will, I'll get to it tomorrow. And it has to happen a lot. And I actually I would encourage anybody from the younger generation to do that as often as you can. We giggled a little bit about the fact that most of us on this panel never said no. That's true. And as we hear it now, we're like, what? Did you just say no? Like, I never said no. We giggle because that is a generational difference, but it doesn't mean that we did it right or that anybody's doing it wrong. But I do think that there's a way to do it that achieves the most amount of peace. And that is to say, I can't, but here's an idea for you, or I can't, but I've set something in place for you that'll help you get there. And I never feel bad about doing that, ever. And I've done it a lot.
And I've seen,
Karen, you've got the last word.
well, I've just seen some very effective ways recently by some of the young folks. What they'll say to me is, I just got asked by that person to do it. I don't know, but what they come to me and they say, but would it be okay if I go to the other partner who I'm working for, but I know we don't have as time sensitive a thing, and push that one down a little bit so I can do this one. They're not saying no, they're actually being incredibly, and that has worked. And so I've seen that recently by a couple of people, and it's helped me kind of help the associates manage their dockets, because so you don't have to just say no. It's no, kind of, sort of, but it's a good, how can I creatively make this work? But yeah, I was in the beginning, I was thinking, I wonder if I ever learned how to do that. I don't think I ever learned.
An important skill, right?
Yeah, I want to learn it.
Yeah, we're always working on it. So thank you all. The last question in the chat is actually, I think, for me, which is, what are we going to do a future panel on in-house counsel? And so yes, we hope this is the first, and this wonderful conversation is the first in a series of women alums sharing things like starting their own firms. We're hoping to do a panel on that, a panel on in-house counsel, and hopefully more beyond that. So thank you to all of you, our panelists, for sharing those insights, and again, engaging in what we hope this series would accomplish, which is to take our seasoned alums and pass down this really hard-won knowledge to a younger generation. And thank you to all of our audience members. Please stay in touch with us. Those of you who are alums, those of you who aren't, stay in touch with us as well. We hope to see you at future panels. And it is just terrific, I think, to have this kind of sharing of information and networking, even if it's on Zoom. Hopefully at some point in the future, we'll be able to do it in person, but we think the Zoom also can facilitate a lot of people being able to join us who perhaps couldn't. So we really appreciate your being here, and have a great afternoon. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Everyone.